Hey everyone, this is just a quick devlog update about the game that I'm working on. I've added a player select. So if you click on the start button, you now have the ability to choose from one of two guardians. Before, in the earlier version, there was only the character on the left. You now have the character on the right. And this isn't just an aesthetic change. They actually have a different secondary weapon, and that's key as far as making this work. So when you select on the character, say you select on him, and you get into the actual battle itself, he has obviously a different appearance and he has a different secondary weapon. So if I right click, he throws an energy bolt and he has the same as the other character primary weapon. Now if I click on the other guy, you'll see that he properly spawns and he has a different secondary weapon. And also at the end of the level, you'll then go to an upgrade screen, and the upgrade screen needs to both appropriately show the right character as well as the corresponding upgrades because the upgrades are different. So, how do I make this work? Well, a couple things. As I've said often, is that when you're making decisions within a game, lots and lots of different decisions, what happens and when it happens, it's very often based on the value of a variable. So in my game flow script, I created, and by the way, the game flow is primarily a repository of static variables. There's a few other things that are done, but that's the primary purpose of it. So you can see I created this new one, selected hero. So the sole purpose of this is to store which character has been selected. So this is just a string. So this is just going to store letters and or numbers. So what I do is I store the tag of the object that you click on in that character select. So if we navigate to the hero select and you click on this robot, P1, P2. So what happens is that value is put into that variable. So if I go to the script that's attached to these guys, the hero choice script, see on mouse down, because all I did was click on the object, and I took that variable that I just mentioned and I set it equal to that tag. Because this is a static variable, it won't change unless you directly tell it to change. So for the entire run of the game, it will not change from this value. And as we said, the two values are P1 and P2. And so basically, wherever you need to differentiate between the two characters, you simply check to see what this value is equal to. Is it equal to P1 or P2? So let's go back to the bot script. So this is the script that is attached to the bots when you are in the actual combat. So here's the village scene. There are the bots. And what happens is they have a script attached to them. So here they have this bot conscript. Now, before I say this, this is not the best way to do this. This was actually a lazy way, but very easy way to do it. And I'll get into a minute why it's not the best way to do it. So in the start section, I simply say if that new variable I created. So if the tag of the object the script is attached to is not equal to it, then delete it. So again, the script is attached to the two robots. So if the tag of the robot is not equal to that value, then destroy it. Because if you come up here, see how it matches? It's not a coincidence. I'm having the two robots use the same tags. So I'm saying that if this script is attached to a robot that doesn't have this value, then go ahead and self-destruct. So that's really kind of the opposite way of the way you should do it, because what you've done is you've instantiated something that you don't need and then you remove it. So depending on how many times you do something like this, you may be having a memory management issue, like a memory leak issue, also loading issues. This game is very it is not resource intensive. It's very low resource. Okay, So I can afford to load something and just delete it. The better way would to, instead of deleting the object, you don't instantiate it in the first place, and instead you simply instantiate the ones based on the tag. So I'm just throwing that out there right now. You don't need to say it in the comments. I know this is not the optimized way to do it. It's better to instantiate rather than delete because, again, if you're deleting something, then that means you loaded something that you didn't need to, which is increased load times, as well as the memory management. Every time you delete something, you have the risk of that memory not being properly freed up. So yes, I realize this is not the best way to do it, but again, when I'm doing the first pass, it's just meant to be for clarity of what's happening, particularly when I'm trying to demonstrate to you guys. So I will call that out when something is not the best way to do it. Okay, so that's why we only have one of the robots in the actual scene. But what about the weapon? How does that work? Well, again, in the botcon script, we check for the mouse button. So the right mouse button, which is mouse button 1, what we do. So this I think I showed before. So we're looking to see if mouse button 1 is being pressed, and we don't want to interrupt an animation. So I'm just making sure an animation hasn't been interrupted. But if those two criteria met, I now have added a new criteria. And what I say is make sure that you have enough remaining shots because the secondary weapon is not infinite. Okay. And then I check for that tag. So I'm simply saying if the object the script is attached to has this tag, then go ahead and do the attack associated with him. So reducing the remaining shots, playing the animation, uh, uh, excuse me, setting what the animation name is going to be, and then playing that animation. This is just debug here. And then this is a coroutine specific to firing this weapon. So you can see these two are very similar. So reducing the remaining shots, what animation is playing, current animation, and then play a different coroutine. And again, the reason why this isn't here is why it's not duplicated here is because this was just troubleshooting. So that's the main thing is that I'm looking at the tag of the object the script is attached to, and then I'm using the corresponding coroutine. And if we look at those coroutines, you can see, so here's the swing axe. So I'm instantiating, spawning the axe object, and then it has a script attached to it to control it as far as the angular rotation. You notice it was spin, as well as the linear velocity. So angular velocity and linear velocity. So that's if you swing the axe, and this is the buckshot, so it's instantiating a different object. And that is about it. Oh, and the way that I handled the upgrade, again, this is not the optimal way to do it, but it was very, very simple coding. Rather than having one upgrade scene, I instead have two. So as you can see, it's upgrade and then upgrades, plural, excuse me, and then what do you see at the end? You see P1, P2. So that let me use a single line to dynamically decide which level to load. And I've mentioned this before in the other devlogs. So once you beat a level, so I believe that's in the enemy conscript because this gets attached to bosses as well, and the boss is what decides that the new level is loaded. Okay, so the boss die animation. So that is just triggered again by HP being reduced to 0. So in the update section, because we want it to be checked every single frame, if enemy HP is less than 1, and it's the boss, again, we're looking at the tag of the object the script is attached to, it goes to boss die animation. So boss die animation, there's a delay because we want the animation to actually play. This is for something separate, which I'll mention. Again, there's characters that can do a lights out. It creates darkness, so that's for that, so don't worry about that. Remaining points, these are the points that you're allowed to spend for the upgrades, okay? But this is the key. Scene manager dot load scene. So rather than just saying load and use a constant, I instead used what is essentially a variable. So again, the name is upgrades. So if I can do this at the same time, upgrades, but then I'm concatenating the selected hero. So again, that's the variable that I created at the very beginning that holds that value for the entire play of the game, P1, P2. So I'm saying load the scene that's called upgrades P1, upgrades P2. And as you can see, upgrades P1, upgrades P2. So you can dynamically determine what scene is going to be loaded. So in other words, rather than having a bunch of if statements that say, if it's P1, load this scene. If it's P2, load this scene. You can just integrate that variable right into the name of the scene. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaways that you can do that. Now, you could certainly argue, well, having multiple scenes isn't the best way to do this either. I totally agree. But because I was going to have to make so many changes, I was going to have to add a bunch of more code saying if it's P1, then delete these upgrade options. If it's P2, instantiate these other upgrade options. And I said, you know something? It's cleaner just to have two scenes and have the options be unique to that scene without all that extra code. So again, it's a balancing act. It's like, how complex do you want the code to be? How how resource intensive do you want it to be? And again, this is very low resources, so I made the design decision just to use two different scenes, and then you can make each scene look different. So right now they don't, but you could. So I think that should about do it. So that's how I implemented a player select. The key is using a variable, a static variable, and that you store it based on the object that you're clicking on in the select screen, and then you just make decisions based on the value of that variable. And since I kept using that same value even in the loading of the scene, it made it very easy to dynamically choose what's happening. So again, this is different from what I normally do. I normally do tutorials, and this is more of a combination devlog plus tutorial, but a very at least intermediate tutorial because I'm not getting into all the nitty gritty. I'm just kind of looking back to show you what I've done. So I hope that you have found this useful. Enjoy the rest of your day, and let me know if you'd like to see more of these devlogs.